A red eviction stamp slams onto a Canadian visa, echoing through airport terminals from Vancouver to Halifax. The Maple Leaf Dream, once a glowing invitation to build a life in one of the world's most welcoming countries, suddenly flickers. If you're a student studying algebra in Toronto, a software engineer coding in Waterloo, or a nurse tending night shifts in Calgary, imagine opening your inbox and finding a polite but unmistakable message. Your path to permanent residency just vanished, and the countdown to departure has begun. But before the ink dries on visa denial, hit that like button and subscribe. Because in a country rewriting the rules overnight, staying informed might be the only permit you can count on. Canada's reputation was forged on generous immigration and a promise that hard work translated into citizenship. Those days feel distant now. Sky-high rents have turned downtown condos into bidding wars. Emergency rooms stretch wait times beyond 6 hours, and the political mood is shifting from welcome, friend, to we need room to breathe. In late 2024, Ottawa hit the brakes, unveiling a sweeping recalibration that slices future arrivals, caps temporary permits, and rewrites the fine print on every study or work visa already in circulation. The new blueprint staggers observers. Permanent resident targets plunge from a once-celebrated 500,000 to 395,000 for 2025, 380,000 for 2026, and 365,000 for 2027. That single stroke erases more than one-fifth of the promise thousands have spent years banking on. Immigration officers who used to wave applicants through their final landing interviews are now recalculating quotas, like air traffic controllers diverting planes from an overcrowded runway. For families already in Canada on temporary permits, that shrinking funnel means the queue just grew longer while the exit door stayed the same size. Yet the sharper knife is reserved for the temporary stream that quietly ballooned to 7% of the national population. Ottawa has vowed a chop that shared a 5% by the end of 2026. In real terms, the country will issue roughly 157,000 fewer temporary visas in 2026 than in 2025, clawing back the pandemic-era surge that packed campus dorms and downtown basements alike. Overnight, landlords and student hubs who once relied on international tenants are rewriting leases, while cafeteria managers calculate how many fewer trays of butter chicken to prep next semester. International students, long considered the crown jewel of Canada's soft power diplomacy, now face a hard ceiling of roughly 437,000 study permits, down from the 500,000 highs of recent years. The beloved post-graduation work permit, once an almost automatic bridge to Canadian work experience, now demands spotless compliance. Full-time enrollment, no unauthorized shifts, clock and logs ready for inspection. A single misstep, an extra hour behind a cafe counter, a missed tuition installment can trigger instant ineligibility. Board officers have been instructed to scrutinize returning students more aggressively. One missed class on an electronic attendance record can convert a winter break into a one-way flight home. The broader fallout is already visible across sectors. Tech startups in Toronto and Vancouver, once magnets for highly skilled foreign talent on employer-specific work permits, are hitting bureaucratic walls. Delays in labor market impact assessments, LMIAs, combined with tighter scrutiny over wage thresholds and job descriptions, have forced several firms to rescind job offers. Immigration lawyers report an uptick in emergency consultation from engineers and coders whose permits are expiring mid-project, leaving both talent pipelines and product roadmaps in limbo. Meanwhile, spousal open work permits, once a lifeline for families navigating Canadian life together, are under pressure too. New policies restrict eligibility to spouses of graduate-level students or those in high-demand occupations, cutting out thousands of partners who relied on dual incomes to survive Canada's rising cost of living. Couples are making painful choices, some splitting up geographically, others giving up their studies entirely to maintain family unity. The domino effect is bleeding into daycare centers, grocery budgets, and even birth rates among young immigrant families. Adding to the strain, provincial nomination programs are quietly shifting gears. Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia are recalibrating their point systems to favor applicants already in high-paying, full-time roles, effectively closing the door on many newcomers still climbing the economic ladder. For thousands who planned their future around the promise of permanent residency, the sudden rule shifts feel like betrayal. What was once a linear path to citizenship now resembles a minefield of quotas, audits, and ever-narrowing loopholes. Aisha, a biomedical student from Nairobi, felt the chill firsthand. She spent 2 evenings a week tutoring math beyond the newly tightened 20-hour cap, unaware the rule had changed. On re-entry after visiting family, an officer scrolled through her digital timesheets, stamped her passport canceled, and gave her 48 hours to leave. What began as an academic dream dissolved into an emergency packing blitz, a tearful goodbye to classmates, and a shattered career blueprint. Work permit holders aren't spared. Reforms to the temporary foreign worker program reduce low-wage permits to a single year and force employers in cities with unemployment above 6% to prove no Canadian applicant exists before hiring abroad. Critics long demanded safeguards against exploitation, yet the new guardrails arrive with side effect. Each renewal refusal pushes another laborer toward the departure lounge. Food processing plants and prairies, already short-staffed, whisper about lost contracts. Seniors' residences brace for nursing assistant shortages. Construction bosses wonder how to pour concrete without the crews that kept projects on schedule. In the name of system integrity, the spring 2025 Express Entry overhaul eliminates the bonus points that once rewarded valid job offers. Overnight, hundreds of profiles plummeted in rank. Raj, an IT manager in Mississauga, watched his comprehensive ranking system score drop by 200, the difference between certain invitations and indefinite limbo. His company tried to reassure him, but the reality is brutal. Without those points, his invitation window may never reopen before his work permit expires next fall. Provinces are responding with a patchwork of workarounds. Ontario's employer-driven nominee stream sees a flood of last-minute applications as companies rush to secure permanent pathways for key staff. Alberta and BC push Ottawa for flexibility in sector-based exceptions, citing critical vacancies in logistics and clean energy. But even where exceptions exist, the processing bottlenecks remain. A nomination may come through, but if federal approval stall, the visa clock still runs out. Housing remains the elephant in the room. Federal caps on temporary residents are framed as easing pressure on rentals, but in practice, displacement are localized and immediate. Whole floors of apartments once leased by tech workers in Vancouver now sit empty, yet rents haven't dropped, because landlords hold out for international students who still pay up front. Cities with fragile labor ecosystems face a double hit. Fewer renters, fewer workers, and no clarity on who will step in to fill the gaps. Universities face their own reckoning. Reduced postgraduate work permit eligibility means fewer applicants from India, China, and Nigeria, countries that previously filled classrooms and balanced budgets. Institutions scramble to replace lost tuition revenue with domestic enrollment, but with birth rates stagnant, that math doesn't work. Some smaller colleges have already frozen hiring. Others weigh campus closures. The immigration rules may aim to rebalance the system, but ripple effects are redefining Canada's economy in real time. A simultaneous squeeze hits the International Mobility Program. Open work permits under global talent streams tumble from 285,000 in 2025 to barely 128,700 the next year. For employers who rely on design engineers from Taipei or UX specialists from Lagos, the message is clear: train local or relocate projects overseas. Start UPS once drawn to Canada's inclusive brand now hedge bets, registering backup offices in Austin, Lisbon, or Singapore. Already, immigration consultants are overwhelmed. Clients who once asked about timelines and document lists now ask if it's even worth applying. The fear is not just rejection, it's the moving target. Rules that applied 6 months ago no longer hold, and government portals flood with updates, clarifications, and contradictory memos. Legitimate applicants are stuck second-guessing paperwork, while predatory agents exploit the confusion to sell false guarantees. For many, what was once a hopeful process now feels like a legal obstacle course with a trapdoor under every step. Universities are feeling the ripple effects. Enrollment rejections for fall 2025 are being slashed, and scholarship funding is shrinking in tandem. With fewer international students arriving, budgets tied to tuition premiums are tightening. Institutions in smaller towns, already relying on foreign enrollment to fund science programs or keep dorms open, are bracing for layoffs. For campuses that prided themselves on diversity and global outreach, this isn't just a budget cut, it's an identity crisis. Provincial economies tied to immigration pipelines are recalibrating. Manitoba's trucking industry, heavily supported by foreign Class 1 drivers, is warning of delivery delays. Atlantic Canada, which once led pilot programs to attract new residents, is seeing skilled applicants turned away mid-process. Even Quebec, traditionally more selective, is voicing concern over labor shortages in healthcare and construction. Across the board, provinces that once competed to welcome immigrants are now quietly scaling back, unsure whether their invitations will be honored by federal caps. The private sector is also reconsidering its bets. Venture capital firms that backed AI labs and fintech platforms in Canada partly did so because of access to global talent. With that pipeline drying up, some are redirecting capital to countries with more stable immigration environments. Remote work is no longer a stopgap. It's becoming a default. And for the first time in years, Canadian firms are losing out on contracts because they can't guarantee staffing. Border enforcement tools are sharpening. 2. Officers can now avoid a visa on suspicion of non-compliance without lengthy hearings. Stories circulated passengers diverted to secondary inspection. Phones scanned for pay stub apps, calendars, or WhatsApp chats hinting at excess work hours. Those flagged get a choice that isn't really a choice. Depart voluntarily within days or wait in detention for formal removal. The psychological toll is immense. Every ping from the Arrive app feels like a potential detector alarm. Politically, these measures are fueled by a rare consensus. Canadians across party lines blame runaway migration for rent spikes and crowded clinics. Polls show a majority who once cheered diversity now demanding breathing space. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau admitted the post-pandemic surge missed the balance, but his opponents see blood in the water. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre paints the Liberals as architects of chaos, promising an aggressive link between immigration ceilings and housing starts. It's a powerful narrative. No new roofs, no new residents. Election strategists foresee immigration policy becoming the ballot box sledgehammer that could topple a decade-old government. Economists warn that the cure may poison the patient. Canada's workforce is aging faster than recycling trucks' empty bins. Without buoyant immigration, long-term growth could skid to a crawl. Yes, GDP per capita might nudge upward as population growth slows, but overall output, innovation, and tax revenue risk stagnation. Hospitals facing a wave of retiring nurses need replacements. Tech clusters counting on international coders could lose momentum to hungrier hubs abroad. Beyond spreadsheets lie human stories. Couples who met in ESL class now consider splitting so one partner can retain status. Graduate researchers halfway through groundbreaking lab projects lose funding when visas lapse. Children born in Toronto to parents on temporary permits discover that their birth certificate's maple leaf doesn't guarantee their family can stay. The sense of belonging, once the strongest currency in Canada's immigrant tale, gets discounted overnight. Immigration-dependent industries are quietly mobilizing. Associations representing hospitality, agriculture, and logistics are drafting white papers and lobbying for exemptions. Their argument is blunt. Economic recovery can't proceed without boots on the ground. They point to vacant shifts, unpicked produce, and shuttered small businesses as early signs of structural damage. Some employers are even proposing regional visa pilots, where retention rates, not just job offers, determine policy adjustments. Inside the government, cracks are showing. Internal memos reveal tension between departments. Immigration wants reform, but innovation, health, and labor ministries worry about bottlenecks. Sources say senior officials are scrambling to design carve-outs for priority sectors. But political optics complicate every move. Offering relief to tech firms or private universities risks public backlash amid rent crises and ER wait times. The balancing act grows more fragile with every headline linking immigration to affordability. Legal challenges are now surfacing. Advocacy groups representing migrant workers and international students are contesting the sudden rule shifts, arguing that retroactive enforcement violates procedural fairness. Class action suits are being discussed. Law firms across Canada report a spike in demand for restoration applications, judicial reviews, and last-ditch asylum claims. The courtroom could become the next major battlefield for immigration reform. At the community level, anxiety bleeds into daily life. Parents hesitate to enroll children in next year's classes, unsure if they'll still be in Canada. Tenants delay renewing leases, and employers hold off on long-term contracts. The ambiguity erodes confidence not just in the system, but in the very idea that effort in Canada yields reward. A social contract built on inclusion feels increasingly transactional, subject to terms, fine print, and sudden revision. And while some policymakers frame these changes as necessary corrections, others warn of long-term reputational damage. Immigration isn't just about numbers, it's about narrative. If Canada is seen as unstable or unwelcoming, the reputational cost could outlive the current policy cycle. Future nurses, coders, and researchers may look elsewhere, not because they weren't qualified, but because they no longer trust the promise. Visualize a convocation hall at the University of British Columbia. Caps soar, cameras flash, but instead of job fair booths, there's a kiosk labeled exit procedures. Graduates line up not for recruitment, but for explanations on restoration periods, bridging open work permits, and best value airline tickets. It's a jarring tableau, a pattern interrupt that underscores how swiftly opportunity can flip to uncertainty. Meanwhile, competitor nations smell opportunity. Australian universities advertise smoother residency tracks. The UK highlights a high-potential individual visa for elite grads. Even Germany, traditionally cautious, rolls out English-language tech programs tied to permanent status. If Canada closes its side door, talent will sprint to whichever country swings a new one open. Back home, regional mayors plead for nuance. Atlantic communities, losing entire cohorts of international nurses, fear the impact on aging residents. Prairie farms that rely on seasonal crews to seed and harvest can't automate tractors fast enough. The tension between national targets and local realities widens, and the scheduled federal-provincial talks this autumn promise fireworks as premiers fight for their shared newcomers. Behind every statistic stands a question of permanence. For decades, temporary status was marketed as a bridge. Today, it looks more like a pier that stops abruptly over cold water, without additional investment in housing and healthcare. Trimming immigration may simply buy policymakers a little time while eroding Canada's allure. The gamble, will short-term relief outweigh potential long-term decline? The effects are also showing up in metrics that once told a success story. Application withdrawals are up, particularly among postgraduate students and skilled worker hopefuls. Processing delays, once blamed on COVID-era backlogs, now reflect deliberate bottlenecks. The ratio of temporary residents transitioning to permanent status has dropped sharply. Immigration targets may technically be met, but the pathway has narrowed, and more are walking away mid-journey. For Canadian businesses, the talent gap widens at the worst possible time. AI labs, green tech firms, and biotech startups that depend on global expertise are shelving projects or scaling back hiring plans. Instead of fueling domestic innovation, red tape now redirects ambition elsewhere. Some companies are even relocating team members to more immigration-friendly markets, sacrificing Canadian IP growth for operational certainty abroad. Public discourse is also shifting. Once focused on welcoming talent and fixing delays, it now leans toward restriction, control, and caps. Policy language is hardened. Words like intake control, fraud detection, and system integrity dominate. Advocates warn this shift isn't just semantic. It's changing how newcomers are perceived. The risk is that people who came to contribute are seen as burdens to be managed, not assets to be retained. Provincial nominee programs, once a flexible counterweight to federal rigidity, are also tightening. Draw sizes are shrinking, processing times are stretching, and eligibility is skewing toward the highest earners. Middle-skilled workers, truck drivers, chefs, personal support workers, are increasingly locked out. These are the very people communities say they need most, yet national frameworks are sidelining them in favor of points-maximizing profiles. Ultimately, the contradiction is clear. Canada needs immigrants to grow, but it's making it harder for them to stay. Policymakers argue the reform was overdue, but in fixing systemic cracks, they may have knocked out foundational beams. Without a course correction, the message is no longer welcome to Canada. It's enter at your own risk. As 2025 unfolds, uncertainty becomes policy's shadow. Individuals with expiring documents replay website updates until midnight, hoping for a hint of leniency. Employers hire immigration lawyers as line items in HR budgets. Community centers set up packing plan workshops alongside language classes. Social feeds fill with hashtags combining pride and fear, celebrating Canada's multicultural fabric, while acknowledging a thread is being tugged loose. In the final analysis, the new rules draw a stark line. Comply perfectly or prepare to exit. Some newcomers will pivot, earning extra credentials, mastering French, transferring inland to provinces courting specific skills. Others will decide to finish line move once too often and take their drive, tuition dollars, or entrepreneurial spark elsewhere. Canada's story is still being written, but right now the pen hovers over a plot twist no one predicted 5 years ago. If this video jolted you, or if someone you care about sits awake refreshing the IRCC portal, hit subscribe and join our community of viewers tracking every policy tremor in real time. Drop your experience in the comments so lawmakers can't ignore the human cost hidden behind quotas, and smash the like button to push this information to everyone who still thinks the rules haven't changed. Stay tuned, because when the next amendment lands, you'll want the facts before the clock on your status starts ticking.